The Honourable Member for Regina Lewvan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In June, I had the honour of asking the last question before Parliament adjourned for the summer. I asked how the government would ensure that provinces retain the revenues from carbon pricing, given that if carbon pricing were included in the renewal of equalization, it would count against each province's equalization entitlement and thereby be clawed back. The Prime Minister did not really answer this question on that day, but the next day the government clarified that it intended to renew the existing equalization program, which of course does not include carbon pricing, so it will not be clawed back, at least for the next several years. However, Mr. Speaker, I must report that many of my constituents are not thrilled with the renewal of the existing equalization program. There's a widespread view in both Saskatchewan and Alberta that the program is taking money from taxpayers in our provinces while we struggle to recover from the downturn in commodity prices and transfers it to provinces that are currently enjoying better economic times. So, Mr. Speaker, there have been some proposals to modify the equalization formula. One of them is to change the way in which hydroelectricity is treated. And certainly that might be a good proposal. It would certainly change the distribution of equalization transfers between recipient provinces that have hydroelectricity and those that don't. But it actually wouldn't make any difference for Saskatchewan and Alberta because, of course, neither province qualifies for equalization at all, given that, despite the downturn in commodity prices, our provinces still enjoy relatively strong per capita incomes. Mr. Speaker, another proposal that we've heard on equalization is from Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, and it's essentially a proposal to cut equalization in half and then use the other half of the money to increase equal per capita transfers to all provinces. Now, Mr. Speaker, I certainly support increasing equal per capita transfers to all provinces. I've advocated for improvements to the Canada Health and Social transfers ever since I got elected. But I don't believe that Premier Moe's plan can really be presented as a reform to equalization itself. And I don't actually believe the underlying issue is that Alberta or Saskatchewan need equalization or should qualify for the program. I think the real issue is that our provinces would benefit from fiscal stabilization in the face of extremely volatile commodity prices. And, Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada has actually had a fiscal stabilization program since 1967. However, it's never paid anything to Saskatchewan. In 2016, Alberta was able to qualify for $250 million under this program, but that was really a drop in the bucket compared to billions of dollars in lost resource royalties. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to submit to this House is that rather than arguing so much about equalization, what we might look at doing is improving and enriching the existing fiscal stabilization program so that it provides much more robust support to those provinces that are vulnerable to volatile commodity prices. I hope this is something the government will look at as it formulates the 2019 federal budget. Thanks very much.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague and friend from Canada's now second newest political party, the CCF, for the question. Mr. Speaker, from day one, our party's been focused on helping the middle class. We've got programs like the Canada Child Benefit that's putting more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, and we've got a tax cut for the middle class that raised taxes on the wealthiest 1%. And now, by putting a price on pollution, we're going to make life even more affordable for Canadians and more expensive for polluters. I can confirm with my honourable colleague that the plan will involve keeping the revenues generated from putting a price on pollution in the province where those revenues are generated. Mr. Speaker, this is evidence that steps taken to protect the environment can in fact spur economic growth. It's possible to grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time. With respect to dividends of a price on pollution, our government's focus will remain on helping middle-class families in Canada. We know that any real plan to tackle climate change is going to involve a price on pollution. Pollution should not be free. Our plan is the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions while driving clean innovation and creating new jobs in the green economy. According to the World Bank earlier this year, approximately 70 different jurisdictions were putting a price on pollution. We have evidence right here in Canada that putting a price on pollution works to cut emissions while maintaining economic growth. Nearly half of Canadians already live in a jurisdiction that has experienced a price on pollution. BC has had a price on pollution for over a decade, and evidence shows that it helped cut fuel consumption and GHGs while the economy continued to experience growth. Alberta, where I used to live, has had a price on pollution for many years and has among the highest employment rates in our entire country. We know that Canadians are smart and innovative. Many Canadian companies are developing and implementing new technologies and solutions to cut pollution. In fact, Canadians have created over 500,000 jobs since we've taken office alone, and carbon pricing spurs innovation because the price signal it sends encourages businesses and households to be more efficient and pollute less. This government's preference has been to work with individual provinces and territories if they're willing to take the responsible step and put forward a plan that will have a meaningful impact on emissions in their provinces. But let me be clear. Canadians gave us a mandate during the 2015 election to protect the environment and grow the economy at the same time. Our plan at that time involved putting a price on pollution, and the government's been consistent saying that the revenues generated from putting a price on pollution are going to stay in those provinces. Our approach allows for flexibility for provinces and territories to choose the pricing system that works best for them. However, to deliver on climate commitments that we made with the provinces and territories in the Pan-Canadian framework, we're going to ensure that there will be a price on pollution throughout all of Canada. That's why the Government of Canada is going to implement a federal pollution pricing system in provinces and territories that request it, and in those that do not have a system that aligns with the federal standard. Mr. Speaker, clean growth represents a massive economic opportunity around the entire world. The World Bank estimates that it will be worth $23 trillion globally between now and 2030, and we want to be on the front edge of that wave. We are taking action to ensure that the Canadian economy takes maximum advantage of this opportunity. Putting a price on pollution is a key part of this by creating an incentive to reduce emissions and invest in innovation, and given the report that we've seen in the National Post just last night, we know that it's actually going to be a net benefit for families, middle-class families in provinces and territories throughout Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Regina, Lewvan.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the member across the way may not have come here prepared to discuss the Fiscal Stabilization Program. It is somewhat of an arcane topic, so I will suggest two of the key problems with it. Currently, it is limited to only $60 per capita for a province that qualifies. That's a very low amount, Mr. Speaker. It contrasts to the current Equalization Program, which amounts to about $500 per capita. So I think there's room to lift that cap on the Fiscal Stabilization Program. A second challenge, Mr. Speaker, is that the current formula is that to qualify for fiscal stabilization, a province needs to experience more than a 5% drop in its non-resource revenues. That did happen to Alberta in 2016, but it's a fairly extreme occurrence. What I would suggest is that we might be able to have a compromise whereby we include half of natural resource revenues in the formula for the Fiscal Stabilization Program, much as we already do for equalization. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.